Red light turns every face on, watch the same tired color. The air tastes of metal, dead coffee, and the recycled breath of men who have learned not to complain. Somewhere below your feet, machinery keeps its calm rhythm. Somewhere above your head is an ocean so heavy it stops feeling like water and starts feeling like pressure with a name. You are listening to sonar through another man's stillness, waiting for a contact to become real enough to matter. On paper, this is deterrence, patrol, readiness, strategic balance. Down here, it is a hull settling, a pencil tapping once on a clipboard, and the private fear that one wrong decision in the dark will not look dramatic when it happens. It will look procedural. That is the first lie outsiders never see. The second is that command feels like power. It does not. Down here, command feels like carrying other people's sleep inside your own skull for years at a time, unseen by anyone else tonight. This is your life through every command tier of a Cold War submarine officer. From the day you arrive too green to trust, to the years when your decisions shape patrols, crews, and consequences larger than any single boat. The climb is real, but promotion is not the point. Pressure is. First, the submarine tests your body. Then it tests your certainty. Then, quietly, it starts testing your identity. From the pier, the service looks precise, elite, almost clean. Inside the hull, prestige and peace separate quickly. The work is checklists, drills, stale air, maintenance, watch bills, swallowed fatigue, and the discipline to act calm when calm is the one thing you do not feel. By the end, you are not simply more senior. You are harder to surprise, slower to sleep, and less certain where the job ends and you begin. That is the journey. The deeper you go, the less visible the cost becomes there. You arrive as a junior officer with fresh insignia, a pressed uniform, and just enough confidence to embarrass yourself. The submarine cures that in a week. The first thing you learn is that space has a hierarchy of its own. Passageways narrow. Valves crowd the walls. Ladders cut compartments into steep vertical slices. Men move around you with the speed of people who belong here. You do not belong yet. Not really. A qualification card appears in your hand like a second set of orders. Learn every compartment. Learn emergency blow. Learn fire boundaries. Learn what can flood, what can burn, what can poison the air, and what happens if you misidentify a valve when everyone else is moving fast. You study until the labels blur. Then someone senior asks a question in the middle of chow, or halfway through the night, or while you are already carrying tools somewhere else. Hesitate once, and they let the silence do the work. No one needs to insult you. The boat handles that. You start sleeping in fragments, waking with system diagrams still hanging behind your eyes. You wanted entry into an elite world. What you got was abrasion, confinement, and the first realization that respect here is not granted by rank. It is granted by usefulness, and usefulness is only the entrance fee, not the privilege you imagined aboard this steel world beneath the cold surface entirely. Eventually, you qualify enough to stand watch without someone hovering over your shoulder. That should feel like relief. It mostly feels like exposure. The control room no longer treats you as a visitor. It treats you as part of the system, which means your mistakes now count in real time. A diving order is not dramatic when spoken well. It is a few clipped words, a repeat back, a set of hands moving to make the boat answer. But when trim is wrong, or a contact picture is unclear, or the sea decides to push against the hull in ways the classroom never simulated, those clipped words begin to carry weight. A department head watches you once during a maneuver and says almost nothing afterward. Just one sentence. Do not confuse sounding calm with being correct. That lesson stays. You start learning the real language of the boat. It is not boldness. It is disciplined repetition under conditions too small and too exhausting for outsiders to imagine worth fearing. The hardest part is not the long hours. It is how quickly the abnormal starts presenting itself as ordinary. Red light, broken sleep, meals swallowed between watches, the absence of weather, the absence of horizon. You thought qualification would let you breathe. Instead, it teaches you how to function without the feeling of breathing at all for long stretches. Then demands more from you now, daily, now. By the time you become a department head, the submarine stops asking whether you can endure it and starts asking whether others can endure your part of it. You inherit a division, a maintenance schedule, a training burden, a stack of inspections, and the grim education that readiness is built out of 100 tasks so boring nobody on shore would believe their importance. A valve packed correctly. A checklist followed on the tired watch, not the fresh one. A casualty drill run again until the sequence survives stress instead of merely existing on paper. A young officer under you talks fast, learns fast, and misses details with the confidence of a man who has not yet seen details turn dangerous. You correct him sharply during a drill, then more quietly afterward, because humiliation is memorable, but not always useful. The point is not to make him fear you. The point is to make him fear the small gap between almost right and actually safe. You begin to understand that a successful patrol is often defined by what never happens. No fire, no grounding, no wrong contact, classified too late, no headline. Outsiders imagine submarine service as sudden crisis in dark water. Much of it is maintenance, paperwork, repetition, and the constant suspicion that the thing most likely to hurt you is the thing everybody has started calling routine. From here on, the burden is no longer survival alone. It is stewardship under pressure, every day. Getting in was never the hardest part. Neither was earning your dolphins. The harder part was what the boat started taking once you were already inside. Your easy sleep, your casual certainty, your belief that competence would make the pressure lighter. It never does. It only makes the pressure quieter. If this already feels heavier than the version people see from the pier, stay with it, because from here, the job stops being about mastering systems and starts becoming about carrying other human beings through them all. As executive officer, you become the keeper of standards no one thanks you for enforcing. The captain carries final authority, but you carry the daily friction that keeps the boat from drifting below it. Watch bills, qualifications, drills, discipline, inspections, maintenance backlogs, personal conflicts, the subtle signs that a sailor is too tired, too angry, too distracted, or too proud to admit something is slipping. You move through the boat listening for the wrong joke, the too long pause, the answer that came half a beat late. Outsiders think leadership becomes grander as rank rises. On a submarine, it often becomes more domestic, more repetitive, more intimate with weakness. You are not chasing glory. You are noticing who has stopped riding home, who is cutting corners on tagouts, who has started treating procedure like theater because nothing bad happened last time. A chief once told you that most disasters announce themselves politely before they arrive. You finally understand what he meant. Success at this level rarely feels like triumph. It feels like preventing the bad day that almost began in 3 different compartments at once. Men may resent the standard, but they sleep under it and live because of it every day there. The first time you take command, the change is invisible from the outside. The same hull, the same watches, the same sea pressing against steel. Yet every report now lands differently because the final shape of the decision belongs to you. Contacts are rarely as clear as briefings promise. Orders from higher authority arrive clean. Reality arrives blurred. A bearing drifts. Intelligence is incomplete. A drill exposes weakness in a crew already carrying fatigue under professional faces. You listen, ask, decide, and understand that no one on board can fully share the loneliness of the last word. You also learn that command is not constant drama. Often it is restraint. Do not rise yet. Do not trail too close. Do not assume the other platform made the same calculation you did. Procedure matters, but procedure does not eliminate judgment. It only gives judgment a structure in which to fail more slowly. A good commanding officer is not the boldest man on the boat. He is the one least tempted to confuse decisiveness with appetite. Younger officers watch you for confidence. What they cannot see is the arithmetic behind it. Every order carries names, families, and futures you will never mention aloud in the control room. By then, you know something worse than fear. You know responsibility, and how completely it separates a man inside command, even among people who trust him completely, professionally, and without question, especially in silence, especially after hard watches and harder mornings. Higher command widens the pressure until it loses all resemblance to the dramas people associate with submarines. Now, the problem is not one ship moving under one captain. It is multiple crews, patrol cycles, refit schedules, readiness reports, training pipelines, inspection failures narrowly avoided, and the quiet attrition that happens when exhausted good people keep solving the same shortages with more of themselves. A boat returns from patrol on paper intact, but you can see the truth in the crew. Marriages strained, tempers shortened, small technical debts postponed because the mission could not wait. Headquarters wants clean numbers. The waterfront gives you compromised realities. One crew is short an experienced officer. Another submarine needs more work than the calendar allows. A captain you trust asks for extra time, and you do not have it to give. The decision you make will affect families, promotions, safety, and the next patrol's margin for error, all at once. This is the stage where responsibility becomes structural. You are judged on outcomes without possessing full control of causes. You sign messages that sound orderly while knowing how much disorder was compressed to make them sound that way. Tactical pressure once lived in minutes. This pressure lives in months, institutions, and human stamina. It teaches a colder lesson than the sea ever did. That readiness can consume people even when the system calls itself successful, efficient, and fully under control. Even when you know the wording is partly mercy, partly fiction, and partly institutional self-protection at scale for everyone involved. At the upper tier of undersea command, crisis no longer announces itself with noise. Sometimes it arrives as message traffic, partial intelligence, a contact report whose meaning depends on what another government thinks you mean, or a political demand for assurance that does not match the sea's refusal to provide any. By now you are responsible for forces whose existence is meant to prevent war by preparing too completely for it. That paradox sits in every briefing room, even when nobody says it aloud. During one tense window, patrol patterns tighten, reporting tempo quickens, and every recommendation you send upward must balance procedure, risk, optics, and the possibility of misunderstanding in both directions. Move too slowly, and you appear uncertain. Move too aggressively, and you create the very instability your boats were sent to prevent. This is command at its most public and most lonely. Everybody wants confidence, while almost nobody can tolerate the full texture of your doubt. You remember younger days on watch, when danger seemed like a single bad decision made in still silence. Now danger is broader and colder. It can be institutional, diplomatic, interpretive. You are no longer just guarding crews from machinery, collision, or fatigue. You are guarding a chain of consequences that extends beyond any hull in your force, from a distance that looks like authority. From inside, it feels like exposure with excellent posture, and eventually, even that posture comes home with you long after the cables quiet down and the briefers go home to sleep, briefed but untouched by the weight beneath those summaries they read upstairs from secure rooms, far ashore, under bright lights and flags. The Cold War does not end inside the submarine first. It ends in speeches, agreements, headlines, and daylight. On paper, that should feel like relief. In your body, it feels stranger than that. You have spent years living inside systems built around vigilance, secrecy, patrol rhythms, checklists, and the assumption that catastrophe is prevented continuously. When the world announces that the tension is easing, part of you believes it, another keeps listening. Retirement does not arrive with a final patrol. It arrives through offices emptied in stages, through handshakes and neat ceremonies institutions prefer when they are done using a person. Younger officers speak to you with respect that is incomplete. They can see the career. They cannot see the interior map. They do not know how many nights you woke already halfway into a decision. They do not know how often a cold cup of coffee meant something had gone right, because you had been too busy preventing the alternative to drink it hot. At home, the ordinary world is wider than the submarine, less forgiving. Rooms feel too open. Conversations wander. People leave things unresolved and call that normal. In the service, unfinished problems weighted with labels, logs, and accountable names attached. In ordinary life, uncertainty wears casual clothes and expects patience. That turns out to be harder than command. You still wake before dawn sometimes. Not from nightmares exactly, but from readiness. Your mind runs an inventory before the rest of you catches up. Who has the watch? What is overdue? Which report matters first? Then you remember there's no watch, no diving officer, no message traffic beyond the next hatch. Only a house, too, still to trust for the first few seconds. It is not fear. It is conditioning matured into identity. Memory changes rank with time. Early on, you remembered systems and mistakes. Later, you remembered names. The officer who hid uncertainty under speed. The chief who could hear a bad habit before an inspection ever found it. The sailor who said he was fine until he clearly was not. The captain who taught you that sounding calm and being correct were not the same act. The families you barely knew but always carried in the silent arithmetic behind each order. History will record patrol numbers, platforms, programs, treaties, strategic doctrine. You remember faces under red light. That is the part outsiders miss when they imagine high command as accumulation. What accumulated was not glory. It was custody, more people, more consequences, more knowledge that success was often invisible because catastrophe never arrived. You became very good at living inside prevented outcomes. That does something to a person. It makes gratitude difficult and vigilance difficult to set down. It makes silence feel occupied. And yet, the job did not remove your humanity. It hid the damage inside competence. By the end, you were better at carrying strain, not freer from it. better at speaking clearly while unsure, better at sleeping briefly, better at reading fatigue in another man before he named it in himself, better at understanding that the finest patrol might be the one history barely notices because nothing happened except that nothing happened. The war grows historical. The reflex does not. That is what remains when the patrol is over and the red light is gone. Sometimes, late at night, you sit in a quiet room and notice the strangest absence of all. No machinery under the floor, no watch turnover, no muted voice repeating a course, no sonar hiss carrying uncertainty through a headset, just household silence. Loose and civilian, asking nothing of you. For a moment it feels softer than peace, and less believable. You think back to the young officer who first climbed below and mistook entry for arrival. He thought the cost would be fear. He was wrong. Fear was temporary. The real cost was adaptation so complete that ordinary calm would one day feel unfamiliar. The boat taught you to compress doubt, to measure speech, to trust procedure, to carry names invisibly, and to call prevented disaster a good day. History will say the Cold War passed. It will list classes, patrols, missiles, commands, and years. That is history's job. Yours was different. Yours was to live inside long pressure until it entered your reflexes, then keep functioning anyway. The ocean is not above you now. The red light is gone. But some part of the watch remains, quiet as ever, still listening, still counting, still measuring silence the way other men measure weather, and still refusing to believe that peace requires no sentry at all. Some reflexes never learned diplomacy. Some silences never stopped sounding like unfinished reports. Some rooms on shore still feel, for one suspended second, like a compartment awaiting your answer still.